It was a cold, dark morning on November 29th, 1981, when the waters off Catalina Island surrendered its terrible secret. The lifeless body of Hollywood legend Natalie Wood was found floating face down, approximately a mile from the yacht Splendor in the Pacific Ocean, by a local restaurant owner. But this wasn't just the end of a Hollywood legend's life. It was the beginning of an enduring Hollywood mystery. What really happened? Let's unravel it together right from the very beginning. The findings will shock you. Natalie Wood wasn't just any actress. Born in 1938, she landed her first movie role when she was only 5 and went on to become one of Hollywood's biggest stars. Her love life, just like her life on the screen, had also been dramatic. Natalie had been married twice to the same man, Robert Wagner. They married in 1957 and divorced in 1962, but couldn't stay away from each other. So they got married again in 1972. They seemed happy on the outside, but as you'll find out soon enough, looks can be deceiving. By 1981, Natalie was mostly retired from acting. She focused on her family, Robert and her 2 daughters. But she made an exception for Brainstorm, a film co-starring Christopher Walken. This would be her final film. As successful as she was, Natalie carried around a haunting fear of water. However, this fear wasn't just a simple phobia. It was rooted in something far more sinister, a dark prophecy.
My mother, her family had left Russia and gone into China. My mother was raised in China, schooled there, and married there. She said to Natalie and me many, many times when we were both very young, that a gypsy had told her fortune and told her that she would have a child that would be known all over the world and that someone was going to die from drowning.
This strange prophecy haunted Natalie Wood throughout her life. Her mother, Maria, constantly reminded her daughters of the gypsy's words, and this created a shadow of dread that followed Natalie wherever she went. But that was not all. Several traumatic incidents during Natalie's childhood and career worsened her aquaphobia, many linked to her mother's manipulation and negligence. It started when Natalie was only 9 years old. While filming the movie The Green Promise in 1949, Natalie almost lost her life in a scene where her character, Susan Matthews, had to cross an old shaky bridge during a fake storm. The plan was simple enough. She'd make it across, then they'd collapse the bridge behind her, so she'd be safe on the other side. Except that's not what happened. The bridge gave way while Natalie was still on it, plunging her into turbulent water created by powerful wind and rain machines. She nearly drowned, and as if that wasn't enough, she broke her left wrist in the fall. But the really messed up part is that Maria, fearing that reporting the injury would jeopardize Natalie's career or blacklist the family from studios, refused to seek medical attention for the broken wrist. For the rest of her life, Natalie had a bone sticking out of her wrist. She covered it with bracelets and called it the badge, and was even instructed not to cry or complain about the pain, further suppressing her trauma. This accident made Natalie's fear of water so much worse. Now, she didn't just fear water because of some prophecy, she had almost died in it. She knew how dangerous it could be. Now, you'd think that any reasonable person would keep their kid away from water after something like that, right? Wrong. Maria kept forcing Natalie into water scenes for movies. During Splendor in the Grass in 1961, Natalie had to swim through a dark pond. The scene was about her character trying to kill herself. Imagine how scary it must have been for someone who was terrified of dark water to act out their death in it. But Maria's cruelty didn't stop there. She went as far as using sick methods to elicit emotional performances from Natalie, such as telling her stories of animal cruelty or, in one instance, tearing a live butterfly apart to make her cry on cue for "Tomorrow is Forever." This had already gone beyond Natalie's aquaphobia. It was about being traumatized by the only person who should have protected her. The worst incident happened on the set of The Star in 1952. They suddenly wanted Natalie to jump into the water and swim, but the actress completely broke down. She started crying and screaming so loudly that even Bette Davis, the famous actress, had to step in. Davis sarcastically said they should have just hired a professional swimmer instead. But unfortunately, Marie cared more about money than her daughter's safety. As Natalie grew up, her fear got worse. She refused to use the swimming pool at her own house, never learned to swim, and was even nervous about taking baths or showers. The only time she would go near water was when she was with Robert Wagner, who loved boats in the ocean.
My mother would never learn to swim either because she didn't know who was going to drown.
But on that fateful November morning, the gypsies' prophecy finally came true in the most horrific way possible. The Thanksgiving weekend of November 28, 1981, began as a peaceful getaway but would end in tragedy. Natalie Wood, her husband Robert Wagner, and her Brainstorm co-star Christopher Walken had set sail aboard the Wagner's luxury yacht Splendor, accompanied by Captain Dennis Davern, for what should have been a relaxing holiday getaway. Saturday evening found the group dining at Doug's Harbor Reef restaurant in Two Harbors on Catalina Island. The celebration quickly became wild, with the Hollywood stars consuming multiple bottles of champagne and other alcoholic beverages throughout the night. Their behavior grew so concerning that the restaurant manager had to alert the harbor master. However, the evil that would befall them awaited them back on the yacht. When the party returned to the Splendor around 10 p.m., the atmosphere changed immediately. According to Wagner's account, detailed in his 2008 memoir, he and Walken had a heated argument about Natalie's career. Wagner believed Walken pushed Natalie to accept more demanding film roles, which would inevitably pull her away from her family obligations and domestic responsibilities. The disagreement between the two men soon escalated, fueled by all the alcohol they had consumed earlier. The confrontation then turned violent when Wagner, in a moment of rage, smashed a wine bottle on the table.
Telling me what she should do and how she should behave. I said, why don't you just, don't tell her what to do and stay out of her life. And I picked up the bottle and smashed it on the table. And, I was really,
So the stage was set for the mysterious events that would follow, ultimately leading to one of Hollywood's most enduring unsolved cases. But Captain Dennis Davern tells a very different and much darker version of the events on the yacht that particular night. He claimed that the real argument wasn't between Wagner and Walken. It was between Wagner and Natalie herself. According to Davern, Wagner was consumed with jealousy over what he perceived as flirtatious behavior between his wife and Walken. The captain described hearing Wagner yell at Natalie to get off my fucking boat and the sound of items being thrown around in the stateroom.
We're fighting, and it was very, very loud, and you could hear things being thrown around the stateroom. It was just a whole lot of noise and a whole lot of yelling. And I started to get very concerned, so I knocked on the door. And Robert Wagner opened the door and he says, "Go away."
After being told to go away, Davern retreated to the pilot house to mind his business. But then everything suddenly went quiet.
When everything got quiet, I thought, something just isn't right. So I went to the back of the boat, and Robert Wagner's standing at the back of the boat. And he looked at me and he said, "Natalie's missing."
The sudden quiet after such a violent argument was unsettling enough, but what happened next would haunt Davern for the rest of his life. A suspicious Davern went looking for the couple but ran into Wagner standing at the back of the boat instead. Natalie was nowhere to be found. Wagner then calmly announced that Natalie was missing, pushing the captain's instincts to search for her and call for help immediately. But Wagner had other plans.
We need to call for help. I said, we had a big searchlight on the top of the boat. I said, I'm going to go turn that searchlight on to see if we can see her. He says, "Don't do that." I said, "Don't do that." I said, "We need to call somebody. We need to call for some help." And he said, "No, we're not going to do that."
We're all thinking the same thing. How will a man whose wife had mysteriously disappeared from their yacht in the middle of the night actively prevent his captain from looking for her, despite knowing her fear of water? But this delay in calling for help would prove to be crucial for the investigation because, according to Davern, it wasn't unintentional. When the captain pressed Wagner about the need to search for Natalie, the response he received was so scary that it left him genuinely fearing for his safety. According to Davern, the dark look on Wagner's face was enough to make him back down from his duties as the person responsible for protecting everyone on board.
You could see the look on his face. I was a little bit on the scared side.
The Coast Guard wasn't contacted until 1:30 a.m., hours after Natalie had disappeared. By the time rescue boats arrived and began their search, it was far too late. At approximately 7:30 a.m. on November 29th, Natalie Wood's body was discovered floating in the Pacific Ocean, about a mile from the yacht. She was wearing a flannel nightgown, wool socks, and a red down jacket, clothing that would have made swimming impossible and would have dragged her down in the water. The autopsy conducted by Dr. Thomas Noguchi revealed disturbing details that only deepened the mystery. Natalie's blood alcohol content was 0.14%, well above the legal limit, and she had multiple bruises covering her arms, legs, wrists, and knees. There was also an abrasion on her left cheek, a scratch on her neck, and a scrape on her forehead. Everyone concluded that Natalie had drowned, but her sister Lana immediately suspected foul play.
Never in a million years left the boat undressed. Undressed? She was in a nightgown.
The official theory was that Natalie had gone to the dinghy intending to go somewhere, but had somehow gotten into some kind of accident. But Lana completely disagreed. A woman known for her impeccable appearance and sense of propriety would never have left a yacht in her nightgown to attend a party or meet someone on shore. It simply wasn't in her character, and years later, after struggling with his conscience and the weight of what he witnessed that fateful night, Captain Davern confirmed what Lana had suspected all along. Natalie was already dead before she hit the water.
And you know you've got a passenger likely in the water. Why do you not do what you have to do?
I was never the captain on the boat. When he bought the boat, he hired me to maintain the boat. RJ was a great boat handler. He was always in charge. I was the one that tied the lines. He was the one that drove.
If true, it would mean that the official cause of death, accidental drowning, was completely wrong. However, not everyone believed Davern's account. The original detective who investigated the case, Dwayne Rashour, maintained until his death that Natalie Wood's drowning was purely accidental. He believed that Davern was exaggerating the events to sell his book about that night and gain attention.
Found out I was investigating that case, I still get questioned. To this day, people say, did he really kill her or did he? No. She fell off the boat and drowned accidentally.
However, Rashour's confidence in his original investigation would later be challenged when new evidence emerged. In 2011, 30 years after Natalie's death, the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department made a shocking announcement.
We have received information which we felt was substantial, enough to make us take another look at this case. We have several sources that have come forward with additional information, and as I said, we have found it to be credible enough to go ahead and take another look at the case.
The reopening of the investigation brought new attention to details that had been overlooked or dismissed in the original inquiry. Witnesses came forward with accounts of hearing a woman screaming on the night of Natalie's death. Screams that were never properly investigated in 1981. It wasn't until the coroner's office took another look at the physical evidence that they made a startling discovery. Natalie Wood didn't just drown. In 2012, Natalie Wood's death certificate was officially amended. The cause of death was changed from accidental drowning to drowning and other undetermined factors. A 2013 coroner's report addendum noted that some of the bruises on her body, particularly those on her arms, wrists, and knees, likely occurred before she entered the water. This raised the terrifying possibility that Natalie Wood had been assaulted before she drowned. The investigation reached a climax in February 2018, when the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department took an unprecedented step. Robert Wagner, then 87 years old, was officially named a person of interest in his wife's death. Lieutenant John Carina stated that Wagner's account of the events didn't add up and cited numerous inconsistencies in his story. It's not surprising that suspicion fell on Wagner given the disturbing allegations that had surfaced over the years. Beyond the 1981 incident, there were claims of prior abusive behavior spanning decades. An elderly woman who had worked with Wood in the 1960s told investigators that Wagner had physically assaulted his wife in their dressing room. While these allegations remain unproven, they still raise serious questions about Wagner's involvement. Till today, Natalie Wood's death remains an open, unsolved case, officially classified as drowning and other undetermined factors. Nobody knows for sure if it was a tragic accident, as originally determined, or if it was the result of an argument that spiraled out of control. The mystery of her final hours will likely outlive us all, but one thing we know is that the magic she brought to the silver screen will live forever. If you enjoyed this video, like and subscribe to the channel for more content.